whole meeting for Tuesday, November 12th, 2024 is now called to order. Andrea, would you please call the roll?
Good afternoon, everyone. It is 2:08 p.m. And as a reminder to all in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page. Calling the roll, Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Sweeney.
Present.
Mr. Byrne.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Schron. Mr. Schron is absent at the moment. Ms. Conwell.
Present.
Ms. Turner. Ms. Turner is absent at the moment. Ms. Stevens is absent at the moment. Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Council President Jones.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Andrew. All right. I've been informed that our prosecutor, Michael O'Malley, is here, county prosecutor, and he'd like to share with us. So we're going to extend a courtesy to him before we begin public comment to allow him to share in his own way.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to, first of all,
County Prosecutor, if you could state your name for the record, please.
Michael O'Malley,
Thank you.
County Prosecutor. It came to my attention today that there was issues dealing, you're going to be seeking to approve the reappointment of the sheriff today, and I just wanted to bring up one issue that I have, and it's everyone's fiduciary obligation to this county. And what concerns me as your county prosecutor is, in fact, as you know, you had asked it not long ago about the jail agreement between the county and the Sheriff's Department and the city of Cleveland, and that has still not been fixed. And it goes on and it goes on and it goes on. And it is critical to this county that we receive a fair agreement. And as we continue to provide more and more services to the city of Cleveland, like the downtown patrol, I would suggest that we have some leverage. And they get a downtown patrol, which quite frankly they should be paying. We have de-incentivized any need for them to hire police on their own because we are now picking up that expense at the county's expense. And meanwhile, we still can't get a fair contract for the county jail. So first and foremost, I think we ought to revisit as a county whether they are paying for the downtown patrols. Our cash continues to go down while their cash surplus continues to go up. And not that I don't think we should be fulfilling that obligation while they need police, because I think we right now are at a critical time where the city of Cleveland is down police officers. But I do, while we are furnishing this benefit to them, I think we should be being compensated fairly. And second of all, we should use that leverage to fix this jail agreement and fix it now. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
For the record, Council President,
Yes.
Councilmember Schron is in attendance.
All right, Councilman Schron, welcome. All right. At this time, Andrea, let's begin our public comment.
Chief John Majoy.
Good afternoon. Chief John Majoy from the Newburgh Heights Police Department. I also serve as the chairman of the Northeast Ohio Amber Alert Committee and the president of board of directors for Cleveland Missing. Earlier this year, I attended a safety committee meeting here and then later a council meeting where we were asking for ARPA grant funds to put on the 2024 Northeast Ohio Amber Alert Conference. And I am here to report back to the council that we had the conference on October 23rd. It was nothing short of amazing. The ARPA funds were used to bring in a dynamic speaker who is Elizabeth Smart, which many of you know. She was kidnapped in 2003 and held captive for 9 months. And having been to a number of seminars in my law enforcement career, I have never been to one where I saw an entire group of 375 criminal justice practitioners so fixated on a dynamic speaker like we had. If it was not for this body here, that conference would have never happened. It was a free conference, and we were able to subsidize for agencies so they didn't have to pay to come to this, but it really elevated people's thinking on missing persons and Amber Alerts. And as you know, we see these all the time. We just had one last night, tragically, there was, but it did have a successful outcome, so the victim was found safely. But I want to thank this council personally. I'll start with Mr. Kelly because he was able to take my request and then forward it to this body and yourself, Mr. Jones. And I just want to commend you for recognizing the importance of victimization when it comes to missing persons. And again, without this body here, that conference would have never happened, and we received nothing but positive feedback. I had a meeting this morning with CCOMS. Their administration was fully supportive of this. I want to recognize Lisa Rafferty and Jackie Costa because they were also an integral part of this, and they do an amazing job for the county. So thank you very much for your time, and again, thank you for your support.
Thank you.
That concludes the public comment portion for today's meeting.
All right. At this time, item referred to committee confirmation hearing, and let's let the record reflect that I see.
Let the record reflect that Councilmembers Turner is in attendance as well as Simon.
Excellent, excellent. Welcome to the confirmation hearing, at which council will consider the appointment of Harold A. Patel as the Cuyahoga County Sheriff. The county charter provides that the sheriff is appointed to a 4-year term. Mr. Patel is being appointed to fill an unexpired term ending December 31, 2028. The sheriff is charged with performing the powers and duties vested in sheriffs under state law, and additional powers and duties as may be established by ordinance. The sheriff may only be removed from office prior to the expiration of their term by a supermajority of votes of council. The hearing process will proceed as follows. The nominee will be offered an opportunity to address his qualifications, motivations for seeking the position, and outlooks and plans regarding the office. Council members will then be offered the opportunity to ask questions of the nominee. For the sake of time and to allow the opportunity for everyone to ask questions, I'd ask members to limit themselves to 2 questions. Time permitting, additional questions may be asked once everyone has had an opportunity. Once all questions have been asked, we will entertain a motion to recommend that council approve or reject the nomination for second reading at tonight's council meeting and consideration for third reading at the December 10th council meeting. At this time, Madam Clerk, if you would read the resolution into the record.
Resolution 2024-0371, confirming the county executive's reappointment of Harold A. Patel upon his taking of the oath of office as Sheriff of Cuyahoga County for the 4-year term ending December 31st, 2028.
All right. At this time, Mr. Patel, if you would come forward to address council.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Harold Patel, currently serving as your sheriff. Just wanted, as far as qualifications, I think we went through all those last year, but just a quick snapshot. A long-term veteran law enforcement leader, certainly law enforcement executive. I served many years as a command staff member at the Cleveland Police, ending as a deputy chief of Homeland Special Operations, last 16 months as sheriff, and long-term public servant, having served also 4 years in the Marine Corps, 4 years active, 4 years reserve. So my entire adult life just committed to the safety of our country and our communities. But I want to tell you, it's my privilege to have served as your sheriff for the past 16 months. I appreciate your support and input on a multitude of topics the Sheriff's Department is involved in. I understand the responsibility for the lives of all of our employees and the care of nearly 1,600 residents in the correctional center we are entrusted with. Proper stewardship of this department with respect to those lives and families is critical. When I walked in as sheriff, I found a department with a dedicated professional group of team members who wanted to know the way forward. They wanted stability. They wanted support in their respective functions. As I stated in my first confirmation, I intend to be here for the long haul, to continue providing the necessary stability the Sheriff's Department needs. This includes leadership, vision, operational efficiency, community engagement, and all the components to build a premier law enforcement agency in the state of Ohio and beyond. As I continued my evaluation of the Sheriff's Department, I found that despite the willingness of employees to get the job done, there were some barriers beyond their control. Some of those barriers included bureaucratic, with respect to form and function of certain operations, physical, due to the structure and condition of the facility, budgetary, morale, and commitment. I systematically evaluated all of the requisite functions and met with those in charge to understand how they got into the condition they were in, what they needed to sustain operations, and what an optimized form of operation would require. We must be able to see over the horizon. Last year, I communicated many of my findings to this council and to the executives team. We're able to have terrific discussions on many of those points. It's refreshing to know some of the barriers will be addressed with the occupancy of the Central Services campus. Others we can address through budgetary discussions, and some I have already addressed with my staff. Part of those has been the creation of different positions and functions in my command staff, which allows for the optimal execution of our missions, as well as consistency, which is what our teammates want and deserve. I know we're absolutely moving in the right direction, and we've moved a significant amount with your support and that of the executives team, because we know we're making things better. One area I'm very proud of is the Correctional Canine Screening Program. Thank you, Councilwoman Simon, Councilman Kelly, and the executives team. I thank Council for your support there because its existence is saving lives. It is also a national model, and that is evidenced by the amount of interest and questions that I had by sheriffs and other leaders when I presented on it at the major county sheriffs of America. It's great for employee morale, it increases safety, it saves lives, and it provides officers a way forward. I'm also very proud of the success of the sheriff's update briefings. I call them subs, where I meet with line officers, deputies, professional staff without supervisors, because it's important to get their thoughts about the department, about their daily operations, what their views are on improvements or modifications. My overall vision is a great time to get them to understand where the vision is and where we're going. Because as we all know, the answers are where the work is. They know the nuts and bolts of our department. It's important that I hear clearly and candidly from them without any supervisors present so we can move on action. Our deputies' efforts have saved lives in our communities. Our law enforcement efforts have resulted in more seizures and more firearm seizures than any law enforcement agency in Northeast Ohio. Over 500 pounds of narcotics. These are poisons that would be in our community. They've also impacted the reduction of violent crime due to the number of cases solved and with their assistance and offenders removed from the cycle of violence. I know our efforts will absolutely improve conditions in the facility and beyond. I again thank you and the executive for your support in stabilizing our department. This is a terrific opportunity. I am humbled to have and want you to know it's a hard job if you do it right. It is incredibly gratifying to see the impact in our department and community, and I stand ready to answer any of your questions.
All right, thank you. So we'll begin. Councilman Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you for your service to our country, your service to law enforcement. Veterans Day being yesterday, I want to make sure we cover that too. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
How often do you visit the jail to examine the conditions that are in there?
Through the chair to the councilman, my visits to the jail are all the time, irregular. Some weeks I'm in there multiple times, sometimes not, sometimes off hours, which is probably the best time to go up there when things are a little more relaxed, not the hustle and bustle of the day, but absolutely way in excess of what is mandated by the ORC. In fact, I don't think that it's possible to effectively gauge the performance in the jail and what's going on and kind of feel the tempo going in there once a month, which is what's required by the ORC. I think that that's just impossible.
If I may, one more question, Mr. President. How would you consider the morale amongst your staff?
Through the chair to the councilman, the morale, sir, is absolutely improved since I came in. And based on these various discussions, not only with my visits throughout the entire department and different functions that we have, but with the sheriff's update briefings, the information and the commentary from employees, many of it also anecdotal, but it is absolutely moving in the right direction. And it's definitely improved. When I first got in last July, took a few measures, went in through, I'd say as of 2024, it was palpable. It was like, okay, we're going somewhere. First I walked in, it was They didn't know what to expect, had a lot of questions, some didn't, but they didn't know. As I made my way through the department and talked to more people, the more that they were convinced we're going somewhere good, and I could sense that in our staff.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I may have more next time around. Thank you.
Councilman Miller.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Sheriff Patel, congratulations on your nomination for reappointment as Sheriff of Cuyahoga County. For me, operation of the county jail in a safe, humane, and effective manner is uppermost in my mind. I know we are introducing the contract for the new food service today. What other improvements do you plan to make in the coming year to improve jail operations?
Through the chair to the councilman, a number of them, sir. First of all, yes, the food contract is one that came up, and now it's just a matter of going out to RFP, selecting another vendor. The longer I'm here, the longer I see where there were some gaps probably in the contract and in its execution, and gaps that we could close, not just in the food contract, but in other contracts. The longer you're in position, the longer you kind of see how you can improve something. And it's been very clear to me that that contract holds a lot of power, but it has to be executed properly and managed properly. And we're there, sir. So that's one thing. Aside from that, introducing many programs into the facility. People keep saying, well, we're moving to a new facility, and we are, but that's still a few years away. We have to live for today, and I believe that the more that we introduce programs into the facility now, we can test them out, see how well they work, see how the application is. If something doesn't work, we can retool it, and if it's just not for us, then we can just kind of mark it off the list. When we do move into the new Central Services campus, we can execute those that are working well at even a higher level, because it'll be a new facility, new car smell, probably more operationally conducive to the programming.
So, Mr. President, Sheriff, your role in protecting public safety is one of the most important functions of county government. But no matter how important something is, it can be done in ways that are either cost-effective or wasteful. What changes do you plan to make in the coming year to save money in the sheriff's office without hurting performance, including but not limited to reducing overtime costs?
Through the chairman to the councilman, a couple of things, sir. One thing we just recently did, a week and a half ago, we adjusted part of the continuous improvement program that some of our deputies and supervisors are part of with county government, was the introduction of a new shift pattern. It was important to know that going to 10-hour shifts increased coverage in certain areas, probably in those critical times. So we evaluated the amount of staff necessary for certain functions, particularly in the field operations unit. That's what I'm speaking of. Some of those functions were specific to their support of correctional functions. So we changed those schedules and realigned those deputies to provide the appropriate amount of coverage at the highest points. In addition to that, having significant, robust staffing allows us to conduct other functions. So that's one thing that we did, and we just did it recently. But secondly, we are in the process of having a staffing analysis conducted in partnership with the University of Akron. That's something that we requested because it's necessary kind of to know, level set where we are. Executives team supported us in that. We secured a contract with them, and they are underway. I think it'll be completed by the end of the year. So first of the year, we should have a good idea of where we are and what's needed. Everything won't be overnight, but I'm sure that's something we can at least at that point start planning for, start budgeting for, and put in different phases and prioritizations. So that's it for that. On the correctional side, sir, I can tell you saving, the changing culture there, the increase in obviously the collective bargaining agreement, and I'll give you a fact, 75, almost 76% of new correction officers hired in 2024 remain employed here. That is significant compared to many other places and what that industry is overall. So it's important to know we're hiring the right people, the ones that are suitable for the position, and they're remaining, and they're coming to work, and that helps drive the overtime down, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I have two more questions, but I'll defer them till the next round. Thank you.
This time, Councilman Strong.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm sorry.
No, my bad, I was under
Okay,
mistake.
all right.
Sometimes we go all the way
Yeah, we just heard from the county prosecutor regarding to the use of members of your staff in the city of Cleveland and to be doing basic policing work, which obviously is an important part of what safety is required. But how did we get to this position where your members of your staff are being used there for the city of Cleveland? Did you enter into an agreement with them? Do we have a building arrangement? Do we have a reimbursement arrangement? Just as you heard from the county prosecutor asking those questions, what is it we have and how did we get there?
Through the chair to the councilman, a couple things there. The prosecutor spoke to the contract that the county has as far as providing jail services to the city of Cleveland. That contract and that service is provided independent of anything else that we do. Now, we can say as good governance, we come to the table and we have leverage points. We have A, we have B, we have C. When I walked in here 16 months ago, there was a need for that critical function of violent crime occurring downtown. It was also a request from Division of Police. Can we help us out with something? I knew that addressing the violent crime occurring downtown was necessary. As my function as sheriff, number one, preservation of the public peace. And we're not saying, hey, hire 500 deputies, put them in the streets. We're saying there was a need downtown Cleveland because of the increase in violent crime, particularly near the Justice Center, West 6th, East 4th, et cetera. So that's what I created the Downtown Safety Patrol to address that. And they've done a terrific job, and brought down the level of violence. I will say, we've had this discussion many times in this forum. It is a reallocation of the staffing and budget that you've given me, you and the county executive. That is a function which takes 7 deputies, a K-9 and a sergeant, and we get a lot of value out of them. Something else that they do, they're not just here exclusively doing the violence reduction downtown Cleveland. They also support field operations unit. They back up the electronic monitoring unit, and they serve throughout the county at the call of any other police agency. Most recently was Cleveland yesterday as part of the task force operation. But last week we received a call from Warrensville Heights and the Cuyahoga Community College Police, and we responded to assist them for a few hours. So it's not just one thing that they do, but that allocation of staffing is something I thought was appropriate given what was going on, despite of it being in the city of Cleveland. If it was in the city of Bedford or Strongsville, we would do the same thing.
On a fee basis, where I'm just following up because I don't think you got to my answer. Is it on a fee basis, on a contract basis, when you're going to go out into Warrensville or any of these other places that we're going to be compensated for your staff that's coming from the county taxpayers in regards to this versus the city or someplace else?
Through the chair to the councilman, no, sir, it's not a fee basis because we're not doing contract work. The Ohio Revised Code allows for the sheriff's department to have primary law enforcement authority in the entire county without having to secure a contract, MOU, anything else with a local municipality or their constabulary. So that allows us to enforce what we think needs enforcing. If we think that there's a certain issue in another city, we can go and address it, and we've done that. We do that on a routine basis. This unit was created specifically for what was going on here. It was also a proof of concept that's worked very well. And working with the communications team, I believe by the end of the month or so, we're going to roll something out where this council has often spoke of the impact unit of years past. That function of the impact unit is very similar to the function that this unit is going to be providing. They're already providing it. It's kind of unofficial. It's going to be official. We're going to roll it out. I already informed the County Police Chiefs Association. That's what we're doing, and we're supporting outside of Cleveland. By definition, the name implies Downtown Safety Patrol. It's downtown-centric. So we're going to rename the unit so everyone's clear, it's not just downtown Cleveland.
So is there a need for the Cleveland Police Department if you're going to pick up all these responsibilities in the downtown area?
Through the chair to the councilman, sir, enforcement of the law with a non-specific, we don't have primary 911 response requirement or obligation. That's something that the local municipalities have. So what we provide is something outside of that because of the given need. If there was a given need at a football game at a certain suburb, we would go there and assist them also, and it wouldn't be a fee basis. It's something that occurs within our jurisdiction.
But that's a spontaneous or single activity. What you're committing to is a long-term commitment from this county to do the work, what appears to be of the city of Cleveland.
Through the chair to the councilman, the city of Cleveland, one could say, with the creation of the DSP, and once it was created, it did spread into other areas. We're going to pivot that into the county-wide function so we can support municipalities county-wide in the same fashion, sir.
All right, thank you. At this time, Councilman Byrne and then Councilman Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sheriff, good afternoon. How are you?
Afternoon, sir.
Thank you for your service. Just some clarification, follow-up from Prosecutor O'Malley's comments as well as Councilman Schron's. As a former mayor, I am familiar with the impact unit and the ability to utilize it on a city-by-city basis or whatever. So you're in the process of putting this together and moving forward with it. Has a decision been made? Will there be a chargeback for those services provided to the communities when they request them?
Through the chair to the councilman, no, sir, there's not a discussion on a chargeback for those services, because it could be, for example, the call that we received last Wednesday or Thursday from Warrensville and Tri-C, went out there for about 3-4 hours, helped them out with a specific function, and came back. I don't think the thought is to submit an invoice for that kind of a service.
Understood. And just as a follow-up, could you give us some examples of what might be the requests from communities for your assistance or service through the impact unit?
Yes, sir. Through the councilman, through the chair to the councilman. One example would be if a community calls and says, hey, I have a number of thefts or break-ins at dealerships in my city. Could assist with that. I have a series of crimes, certain crimes being committed in hotels in my city. We could address that. If a community has something very specific where there's this drug spot, we're trying, we just can't get this thing resolved, we'll assist with that. If we need to deploy some conduct undercover operations to support them, we'll do that also. Anything specialized in that nature, we can provide.
Thanks, Sheriff. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilman Sweeney?
Thank you, Mr. President. Sheriff, how are you today?
Good, sir.
First, I want to thank and recognize the county executive for reappointing you. I mean, he sees how you do your work, and consistency is the thing that I see for the 4 years that I've been down here, 4+ years of the rotating sheriffs. And when you came here, you said, day one, job one, this is my office, or this is my responsibility, and it's going to fall on me. How do you, through the chair, how do you feel the independence of your office is functioning for the 16 months have you been here? Because you're in a very unique chartered situation in regards to who appoints you, who can terminate you, and the stress of independence. Through the chair.
Through the chair to the councilman, I think you, council is quite familiar with the setup, and it's the form of government we operate under. I have a very good working relationship with both the council. I've spoken with councilmen on various things, council persons, and also with the county executives team. As far as comes to independence, operationally, I don't have the executive doesn't call and go, hey, you need to move Lieutenant Smith to night shift. You know, it's nothing like that. So when it comes to that, and that's kind of like the important thing, that we're able to make and execute these missions because he hired a professional for a reason.
Yeah.
Each one of the directors is an expert and a professional in their space for a reason.
And through the chair, that was my follow-up. Do you kowtow to council people? Do you kowtow to the chief of staff or the mayor? I mean, the mayor, the county executive? No. That's the beauty of you. You work hard, you own this, and I'm just going to support you like I did last time. Just keep up the good work, and we're very fortunate to have you. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman.
At this time, Councilwoman Conwell and then Councilwoman Sunny Simon.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair to the sheriff. A number of break-ins in the employee automobiles. How is this being addressed by your office?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, members of our department, including some members of the Downtown Safety Patrol, but many of our investigators have gotten together and created some details downtown. Friday evening, one of those led to a foiling of an aggravated robbery. It was going to take place right in front of them, which led to a pursuit of this vehicle, which they broke off, and the Cleveland police stopped the car a few minutes later, at East 116th, they had committed another robbery. They arrested one individual, 3 got away, and seized, I believe, was 2 guns. So that was a detail they conducted. Today, or last night, that same group of investigators from the Sheriff's Department, partnering with the Cleveland Police and some others, arrested one of the individuals involved in these. So we're absolutely addressing these, and obviously it's all about timing and staffing and deployment, but that's necessary to lay eyes out there to let people know that we are watching, we're on guard, and that they're not going to get away with it anymore.
And the break-ins just weren't for downtown, they were other areas too.
Through the chair to the councilwoman, I know as far as 40th, and they spread in, so when I speak of that loosely, 2 different factors here. One, the Downtown Safety Patrol, when it was created, the geographic boundary was, think of Cleveland State, I'll just leave it at that, I'm not going to be very specific with it. And the codified ordinances of the city of Cleveland defined the central business district as extended to East 55th. So I think 40th is an extension of that. So we would agree with you, ma'am. It's not just downtown centric, but it is around, and it's important that we let them know that we're watching.
So the administration is keeping you in the loop. You guys are having dialogue in terms of these break-ins, because it's probably your guys showing up versus City of Cleveland showing up.
Through the chair to the councilwoman, yes, ma'am, we are in dialogue on that and strategizing how we can make that better.
Okay, through the chair, in your opinion, are the current medical services at the jail sufficiently resourced and staffed? And do you see any opportunities with the recently released RFP in regards to that?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, the new RFP does allow us to address some issues that may not have been addressed there before. One of those, obviously, the addition of a nocturnist and making sure that we follow the contract that's in place. As long as everyone is coming to work and we're staffing accordingly, we'll be fine, because I think the plan is laid out well. We just have to make sure that we have contract compliance, watching it, supervision, watching it, because it's a partnership with the provider. Partnership between what we need in the jail and also what the provider is bringing to the table, and maximizing that for the service delivery.
A few of us, through the chair, did meet with Dr. Alexandra today. Have you met with her yet? That's the new interim, or the chief, or CEO at Metro.
Through the chair to the councilwoman, I have not, but I know that Chief Rivera from the correction facility has an appointment to meet with her, so he is meeting with her to make sure that they understand what the needs are and what the expectations are, and also how we can partner.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Simon, and then Councilwoman Meredith Turner.
Thank you. Congratulations, Sheriff, on your nomination. I'm curious about central booking and how that's been going. The council, put a lot of money into rehabbing that Justice Center, and want to see if that's reduced population.
Thank you. Through the chair to the councilwoman, a couple things with centralized booking. I think that you're aware that I was involved in the initial planning of that a few years ago from my previous seat, so I'm very familiar with that. I can tell you that speaking with Click Bird and some others, we're going to move that forward. That seemed to have got stuck in the mud there for a bit. We're moving that forward. I believe that our execution is going to be roughly 85% of what we envisioned 3.5 years ago, coming out of COVID, et cetera. But the good thing is that the money that council expended in that is very well spent, because we're going to use that format with some minor tweaks to it. One thing we're already doing is introducing reentry services into it, veteran services into it, so that we have touch points from everyone. The ultimate success of centralized booking is going to rest on all the partners providing a representative to that.
Sheriff, what do you mean it's been stuck? What's been going on? Have we been utilizing it at all? To what capacity?
Through the chair, through the councilwoman, the centralized booking concept as it was envisioned originally obviously didn't take off 100%. The physical layout was made, and I think that the correction staff did what they could to staff where they are. However, as far as having partners sit in every single one of the seats down there and represent it and say, okay, today we push the button, start centralized booking. We've performed some of the functions, some are ad hoc, but it's still a work in progress. To get it working smoothly where we need, I think we're looking at early next year sometime.
Are we looking at staffing issues? Is that what's been going on, or just participation, partners' unwillingness to be there, staffing? What's caused the stuck?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, I think one is a further evaluation of process, and two is obviously staffing and representation from our partners.
Okay. Well, I think, Chair, we should drill down on that in your committee, not Chair Gallagher, I mean, in safety. Thank you.
Councilman Turner?
Thank you, through the chair. As when we talked before, I told you that I was very pleased with your progress and commitment to chartering a new path forward for those in your charge. Congratulations. I was very concerned about whether or not we would make it to this day. November 10th, I celebrated 3 years here. And during that time, we had Violin, Hammett, Griner, and now yourself. So I'm very excited about you being transparent and truthful about your commitment to us. It's very important. Can you talk to us about your top priorities for each division, corrections, civil court orders, law enforcement, and protective services?
Yes, ma'am. Why don't we start with the corrections through the chair to the councilwoman. Corrections. Job one, priority one is ensure that we have an environment where everybody comes to work. I know it sounds basic, but part of changing morale and changing practice there is that everyone comes to work. It is significantly better. It's not perfect. I'm not going to tell you that. Significantly better and getting better by the day. If everyone comes to work, that load is spread amongst everyone a little more equitably, which is important when you're talking about people who do not come to work cause other downstream effects. So that's important. That's one. Two, ensure, and in the correction center, that's one. Two, ensuring that we are providing the right services to the population that we have. Why? Because some people are in our care who require some other service. If we can bring that service to them, and that'll prevent their return, or that'll make their life better so they don't reoffend and return, I think we're all ahead of the game. So making sure that we deliver some of that before we move. We cannot wait till we move. So those two things, one specific to the staff, the other one specific to our residents. On the deputy side of the house, always looking for increase, and I don't mean to be frivolous here, like I'm looking, if we could add 2 guys to, maybe make sure that they monitor the gifts or the playground. No, always looking for where we can add value. And I know that the sheriff's department adds significant value, properly staffed and properly focused in certain areas, looking to grow that in whatever capacity we can. And I've had a number of discussions with the executives team, with a few council people about some of the things that we're looking forward to introducing, respective to the budget also, but there are some things that we can do just programmatically. So that's one, growing that, and also continuing the morale theme. Morale is very good on the deputy side. The change of hours is something that was well received by the FOU personnel, and the completion of that staffing study will really allow us to make some changes as necessary. Protective services officers, number one is making sure that they feel part of the team, because that's something that hasn't always been the case. May not have risen to your level, but it's important that they feel they are part of the team. And I've met with them, spoken with them, made some changes, structural changes within the division, and I want to make sure that because they are a valued part of our team, and the service that they provide for our county employees is significant. So making sure that's recognized. Also, ensuring that we're deploying the right amount of officers for the buildings and the functions that we require, making sure that we get that size right. Civil processes, 2 things. One, maybe relooking at and that will probably be part of the staffing study also, looking at some of the staffing there, if we can tweak that a little bit. But the other thing is whatever we can do on paper, whatever we can do getting off of paper and digitized, that's the way to go. As we look at moving in a few years, I'd like to reduce the amount of paper that we have in our files and everything moving forward. So I think that will be a significant impact, which will streamline operations and make them feel like they're working in the 21st century.
Okay. A quick follow-up. Can you talk to us? Do you have sufficient female staff? And do you have any strategies to increase if you don't?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, The term sufficient is kind of vague as a number. I do know that there is a 30 by 30 campaign going on in law enforcement. I can tell you that in the correctional staff, we're probably 52 or so % female officers. On the deputy side, not so much. So we are any female officer that wants to apply to be a deputy sheriff, we welcome it, as long as they're qualified and suitable for the position, open door. But that is something we're always looking to make sure that we include a sufficient amount of females. The other functions, PSOs and CSOs are well represented in female ranks.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheriff.
All right, this time, Councilman Michael Gallagher.
Sheriff, welcome.
Yes, sir.
And as we've spoken privately, what I've heard today is that, and I'm going to work on the safety patrol downtown. You came on board 16 months ago. When was what was the genesis of the patrol? Was that immediate?
I was sworn in July 18th of last year. Probably through the chair to the councilman, I was sworn in July 18th. Probably in the second week, I informed the command staff I wanted to form something, and I believe the go date was August 17th. So within a month of being here,
Okay.
I fired off the Downtown Safety Patrol.
Because I've asked you privately, and I've asked the executive privately how this occurred, and the answers didn't really jibe, so I wanted to get it on the record. Shortly after that, we went into budget hearings. Now, this wasn't budgeted in the previous budget before you, and then you go into a new budget, and it wasn't budgeted in there. How'd that happen?
Through the chair to the councilman, budgeted within the sheriff's budget, sir. It was a reallocation of my resources. I had X amount of people, did not draw any from field operations, which is the unit that supports the hospital runs from the jail. Picked members from throughout the rest of the department so as not to impact that function and deployed them out. And I figured that 7 deputies, a canine, and a sergeant was something that we could do out of an agency our size for that specific function.
Well, it wasn't in the budget because I looked and I talked to you about that. The impact unit previously was in the budget, and throughout all the various sheriffs that we've had, that somehow disappeared. And that was budgeted because the council agreed that it was good for everybody in the county to be able to afford themselves or have those services if needed. That's why we budgeted without payback to the communities. We didn't think that was fair, and that was from us. Now, this is a freebie for the city of Cleveland, where you came from, because of Cleveland's problems brought on by Cleveland. It's amazing how that happens. So Cleveland has a problem brought on by themselves, not corrected now 18 months later or 16 months later since you've been on board. Yet we have this no money coming in, no agreement with Cleveland. Our guys out there, one kid got shot, one guy beat somebody up, and my greatest concern is someone's going to get killed. And whose responsibility is that going to be? Not to mention the fact that Cleveland's under a federal order, which I still suggest this is a backdoor maneuver on that. And I wonder what the federal judge would have to say about that. If he's watching, I'd love to hear from him. But the reality is, and the way the perception is in the media, is that I'm against the downtown patrol. I'm against the fact that it wasn't budgeted. And it costs us $1.2 million. And when you say that you shifted things in the budget, you really didn't, because the overtime cost to Cuyahoga County, while this downtown patrol is patrolling and only patrolling, is an extra $950,000. So now we're in for $2.15 million that Cleveland's benefiting, yet daily they stick it to us on the jail contract that the prosecutor mentioned. This is a battle for us. My battle with you and the budget is, you started out, and this is not your fault, but you were not afforded the overtime of $20 million on the initial budget. I brought that up to you when I was reading it and called you immediately. When I was in my garage, I'm like, did you see your budget? You got zeroed out. The council battled to give you $6 million more. The administration kicked in $2 more to $8 million, which was $12 million under really what you needed, plus the $2.150 that Cleveland's sucking off of us with this downtown patrol. That's a problem.
We have never in the history of Cuyahoga County had a division be so over budget, or actually in your position, under budgeted and then going over budget with freebies to Cleveland. I'd love to do it if we can afford it. What have you done the first year to make up that overtime gap?
Through the chair to the councilman, as far as that, sir, I think we see that a little bit different, the reassignment. I can tell you that extracting those numbers may look one way, but it's not exactly accurate, because we may say DSP is working X amount of hours. What's not accounted for is that a lot of those hours are in support of field operations. A lot of those hours, they're maybe backing up in electronic monitoring. And a lot of those hours are doing something outside of the city, which I get your point. If they were not created, they would probably not be available to go and help one of our suburbs. I get that point. But when you start breaking it down, how much time they actually spend doing that patrolling, it's significantly less than the 1.2.
I'm getting these numbers from your office.
Understood.
You're disagreeing with your numbers.
Through the chair to the council, not disagreeing with the numbers, just saying that there is not the ability to break those down to that level at this point. Working with IT, and I'm sure we'll have something shortly. The point is, Councilman, that it is my position that reassigning within the sheriff's budget without an increase, those deputies to perform that function to increase public safety downtown, where everyone, it's a center of gravity for our county, was an appropriate reallocation of resources.
I look at that as an indictment on Cleveland. We can't afford it. You can't afford it. Did you see next year's proposed budget?
I have not.
Yeah, you're 17 million under what you're really going to need, or actually 17 million over, not counting the downtown patrol, unless that's in there this time. So we've got to find the money. I've looked at the budget. I don't know where 10 million is. You haven't made up the initial 12. You added to it with the 2.150, which is a real number, which is a benefit to Cleveland and a detriment to Cuyahoga County. We're looking next year at 17 million. I don't know where this stops. Do you?
Through the chair to the councilman, sir, I think that sometimes there's a mischaracterization of these numbers. When we're speaking of budgets, I presented to this council and to the executive staff what was required for the operation of the sheriff's department. I got what I got, making what I can, work with it, but we are in constant discussions on how we can address certain things, how we can prioritize critical functions, but it's not for lack of desire, not for lack of saying, hey, here's where something should be. So I walked into here, that number was in the 20s for the past 3 or 4 years. So I don't think it's safe to say that snap of the fingers, or better yet, a stroke of the pen, and it's going to decrease by 20 million. So, and I do see that the 1.2 is there. I get that, sir.
Actually, the snap of the fingers got you an 8, which brought you to 12.
Thank you.
Out of the 20.
Yes, sir.
Much like the dogs that you requested that Councilwoman Simon and Mr. Kelly got you. See, my concern is that, and I give you a break on that first budget. You came in, you were new, you had no idea what was going on, but now we're going into another routine of, well, it's not my fault, or I'll work on it, or I go back to Krieger. I've actually researched back to Krieger, and I know a lot of people in this room don't even know what I'm talking about. And we've never had this. And again, I'm giving you a break on the first one because you didn't know. You had no idea, and I get that. But then we go out immediately and do your friends over in Cleveland a favor because you came from Cleveland. And you went to their public safety committee meeting. I watched it online, and they're telling you they want more. And I saw you agreeing to that. And I'm like, I think you're mistaken who you work for. And we've got nothing but budget deficits here. And we've got a problem with our finances overall going forward. We've got to be careful. But for some reason, it's not careful in your division. And as Mr. Sweeney said, do you feel independent? He claims, you're independent. Do you feel independent, complete control of the sheriff's office?
Through the chair to the councilman, I am probably as independent as one of the directors here is going to be functioning. Obviously, that's part of the intention of the charter. Do I have total absolute power over everything? No. Can I make my own budget? No. There's many things that I collaborate with the council and with the executives on.
Right.
But when it comes to that whole Cleveland thing, and back to that council hearing, sir, that attendance at that council hearing was no different. I was there, the U.S. Marshal was called in, the Colonel from the Highway Patrol was called in, and the sheriff. It's only appropriate to attend that. They can ask, just like any other municipality can ask, and I remember, I believe it was Councilman Jones, it's not like we sent 50 deputies to Ward 1. So we just do what we're doing. I don't want that to be mischaracterized, that I'm doing favors. I was doing what was right for our community.
Okay, one more question. During the budget hearing, Councilman Schrein asked you a question. Your initial ask for 90 officers, 90 extra spots. And Councilman Schrein asked you, well, I don't understand. You said you'd get them up and running and in within 30 days. You never really answered that. Could you answer that now?
Through the chair to the councilman, a couple things. My increase since last year has been 7, so I'm 8.
Concentrate on 90.
Understood. On the 90. There are a number of officers who have raised their hand, who are in line, who would like to be deputy sheriffs. Because of our budgetary constraints, we can't hire them all. I threw out the number of 90, and if I were to look at our organizational chart, it actually would be on the low side. But the point that the councilman brought up to me last year was, how can any organization increase roughly 50%? That's just not manageable. And I know that the councilman and I, and Councilman and Chief Reese has some discussion on that. I'd like to try and prove that point. The point is, if we hire a large number of deputy sheriffs, I know we can get them up and running and provide superior service in this county. Why? Because we have a command staff in place, we have a playbook, we know what we're doing, and any money expended at the sheriff's department is a strong value to our county. It's money well spent. So I'd like to prove that point, sir. If yourself and the executive work that out, that'll be terrific.
Well, my point where I was going with that is I know how you do it. You'd go over to Cleveland, grab 90 guys who can't wait to get the hell out of there. We all know that. And you know that more than anybody. Because most of your hires come from Cleveland, which isn't a bad thing. They're seasoned officers. We get a freebie. We don't have to train them. And within 30 days, you're correct. You're up and running. But Cleveland's not going to be 90 down. I don't know how many they're down now. They're giving out $10,000 bonuses for people that'll stay. But they won't negotiate with us on our contract on the jail. And they certainly are happier than a pig rolling around in the slop that we've given them for the $2.150 million free a year. It's got to stop. You've got to learn how to budget this. And if you have a flaw, and I think, quite honestly, I think you put a great team together, and I think things are rolling, but this budget is a mess. And now that you're here, it's yours. And again, I don't understand. I've been in the county now for 46 years. I've never seen this. Never. 46 years. And I've researched back to Krieger. It's never happened. The commissioners would have never allowed this. Because if you need extra money, you'd have to go back to them. I don't know what we're doing here. I seem to be a lone wolf here. But other than that, I think you're doing a good job.
All right, thank you, Councilman. This concludes our first round of questions. Is that a follow-up? Are you asking about a follow-up?
You can put your procedure out there.
conclude
I'll
the
follow
first
up
round.
with a second round.
First round is completed. We have requests from Councilman Kelly and then Councilman Miller as our first two questionnaires for the second round.
Thank you, Mr. President, to the sheriff. So to follow up on Councilman Gallagher, first of all, the sheriff department shouldn't be doing Cleveland Police's job. They should do their own job. But the Downtown Safety Patrol, is it your idea? And you've been at our public safety meetings where we've said that there's not money for it. Is it your idea to continue this patrol when there isn't the budget for it? Or is the executive side telling you, just go ahead and keep doing it? question I'd like answered.
Through the chair to the councilman, first of all, it's my idea, because I look at it as a reallocation of resources. And I have the full executive support. Actually spoke with him yesterday, spoke with him today, so I absolutely have his full support on this. I will just, now that you brought that up, Councilman, I just have to make an example here and draw a parallel. If one of our agencies said, we send 3 social workers to get specialized training to interview, forensic training to interview children less than 5 who've been abused, and we had those 3 social workers doing that job, would we say they are doing unbudgeted work? Because it's a little different, which is this, DSP is a little different. So would we say that director reallocated 3 social workers to interview kids, they should not do it because it's unbudgeted? And that's the comparison, that's the parallel I'm drawing. I'm doing something slightly different within the confines of what I have. I'd love to have more, but I'm using what I had. I created a very small unit. I created a small team, and are using them to perform a specific function.
So to follow up on that, so then you haven't been told by the executive side that you need to put the brakes on this because of the amount of overtime that's being amassed?
Through the president to the councilman, no, sir, I have not.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Right ahead, Councilman Miller.
so, first a comment that I support the concerns raised by my colleagues, Councilman Gallagher and Kelly, that if the DSP is to operate, it should be specifically provided for in the budget. That's what the budgeting process is for. My first question is to follow up on Ms. Simon's question, where she asked about the central booking. And in addition to that, we have 2 other programs, the diversion program and bail reform, that are aimed at reducing inmate populations. And my question is do we have room for improvement in each of these areas? And if so, what improvements do you believe that you can help achieve in each of these areas in the next 2 years on diversion and bail reform?
Through the chair to the councilman, a couple things there, sir. First of all, the centralized booking concept is terrific for that. We're looking to tweak it and modify it a little bit. There are some people who come in there who probably shouldn't even get dressed out. They should just make sure that, talk about the bail reform, they should be eligible for bail and be back out of here as soon as we can. We need to make sure that population is specific to those that have to be there. Not that they shouldn't be arrested, but they've come in, we process them through appropriate bail, and on they go. So strongly support that within centralized booking, and that is a function of it. Centralized booking as it was created, there's a couple things we can optimize with it. It is a terrific place to leverage safety. In other words, and this is a lot of inside baseball, but how we conduct the onboarding of residents coming through, how we do clothing changes, different things. Centralized booking allows us to tweak that so that we keep everybody safe. Bottom line is, so people don't bring stuff into the facility. I'm just going to cut right to it. That allows us to do that. Those that will be staying, we'll make sure are going to be safe and we're going to save lives. Those that we can just turn right on out, get the paperwork done and get them out, the better off everybody is. The better off they are, and the better off that our court system is.
And, Mr. President, to the sheriff, what is the status of the new jail management system? When do you expect this system to be fully operational, and what impacts do you believe it will have on our ability to manage the jail population?
Through the chair to the councilman, status is we had RFP, had some competitors. They were all scored by IT and members of the correctional staff. Selected one of the bidders. Contract is ongoing right now. Anticipate rollout date of early 2026. I believe very early 26. What it's going to do for us, it's going to optimize a lot of functions. It's going to avoid us having some crashes. It's going to make sure that things are a lot more streamlined, not only within the facility, but as we share with others. Why? Because that system allows for interfacing with everyone else's system. So it's going to optimize service delivery. It will reduce some mistakes, some human error. Why? Because now things are talking smoothly. Instead of having to transpose something from one system or one platform to another, it's all going to be in one place. So it'll absolutely optimize that, which will ensure efficiency, and the goal is to save time in critical areas and help us make sure we avoid any instance of over-detention.
Okay, thank you.
At this time, our next four members to ask questions, and in this order, Councilman Jack Schron, Councilwoman Sunny Simon, Councilman Martin Sweeney, and then Councilwoman Cheryl Stevens.
Thank you, Sheriff. Moving in a different direction, in your opening comments, you referred to the 1,600 individuals that are responsibility. And the county executive has painted a picture when we were actually being asked to extend the tax on this, that he was calling it a campus concept. What does that mean for you in your mindset, because you're the one in charge of the jail, to call this a campus? When I think of a campus, I think of Tri-C, I think of Cleveland State, I think of places like that, which is okay. I'm not. So what is your vision of what this campus looks like? How does it work for these 1,600 individuals that are your responsibility?
Through the chair to the councilman, thank you, sir, and no qualms about it, unapologetically. Yes, the sheriff is in charge of the jail, period. When it comes to that, it is my responsibility to make sure it runs efficiently, safely, and that we deliver the best service. Campus concept means we're going to introduce additional service delivery, which we may not have today, we'll probably have sometime next year, and we can transfer that to the new facility. Why? Because just to put people in lockup and let them out when they make bail or when they make their trial, it just doesn't really work. We have identified a few cohorts that we'd like to do some pilot projects with here, and we'll transfer those. One of those is veterans. Veterans, there was a veterans pod at one point, probably 5, 6, 7 years ago. We're going to reinitiate that and deliver veteran services. There are some veterans who would benefit from those services. The Cuyahoga County Veterans Administration, as well as the VA, have a plethora of services available to veterans who are incarcerated. We'd like to make those connections. If some of those connections allow them to improve the quality of life so they don't return, all the better for us. Second, there's a group of individuals who have been here, I believe the stat is over 8 times in the past 3 years. Out of those, about 50-something are here today. Identifying those individuals as a cohort and saying, what is it that this individual keeps coming back? What service can we provide to better their way of life so that they don't return? If one of those doesn't return, we're ahead of the game. So that's one other area of delivery. I think that when we talk about services, it's important stuff that we provide because some people aren't going to get service anywhere else. While they're here, let's take the advantage to deliver that service, increase the quality of life, whether it's making them employable, give them some housing, whatever it could be, so they don't come back. Those who are career violent offenders, they're probably going to go somewhere else, and that's probably not going to be our concern. But those that we can extend something to better their way of life and prevent recidivism, I think is what we should do, sir.
When you talked about the veterans, we have about around 60, I think, of the 1,600 are veterans in there?
I think it's 51 here today, sir, yes.
I was just rounding.
Yes, yes.
You keep using the word services, kind of a generic term. Give me specifics. What is a service that veteran's going to get? What is that service that the remaining 1,500 individual, 1,550 are going to get? What are these services that you're talking about? Are we talking about training, education? Are we talking about skill base? Are we talking about getting them a job? Are we talking about working with the justice system to try and help bail reform to get them a job? So as opposed to going down and being incarcerated, I mean, some of these people are there for only a couple of weeks. Some we know, based on the judge's docket, they could be sitting there for months and months. And I keep hearing, oh, we don't have time to train them. Well, if they've been there for 4 or 5 months, we clearly have time to train them. So what are your services that you're talking about? Be specific.
Through the chair to the councilman, a couple of things with that, and that's another group. Another cohort are those who are sentenced from other municipalities. We know they will be here for X amount of time. Rocky River sentences somebody here for OVI for 9 months. We know they'll be here 9 months. The average stay is 34, God bless you. The average stay is 34 days. However, some are here for months and some are here for 2 days and they're out. Identifying those that will be here a longer period of time, I talked about the cohorts, the veterans, the frequent offenders, and those that are sentenced here. We know they'll be here for a bit. Let's start with housing. Through the reentry services, which Cuyahoga County Officer of Reentry working closely with us and deploying staff to our facility, and that's a game changer. Now there's someone here that can see, touch, smell the individual and say, hey, here's how we can help you. Here's what your needs are. We're going to address those. Whether it's housing, employability, when they leave here, if we can have just basic as an ID, facilitate obtaining a birth certificate, basic things that some people need to function that they don't have. When we get to skills, those will be here X amount of time. Let's put a number on it, 60 days plus. Maybe we can have some skill training that we can provide for them. Very basic, whether it's going to be some kind of not necessarily coding, but some kind of a computer skill or other skill that they can provide. And that's something we look for to partner with some entities in the community to provide that. Maybe they won't be a full-fledged welder, but they can have some of the basics or understanding of it. But the key is, let's give them something that they can use when they get out so that they don't have to return.
So you envision doing that through this campus concept. I assume you don't have the training skills to train somebody to be a welder, so that has to be coming from a Tri-C or from a vocational school or something of that nature. Are we talking to those places right this moment to build this campus concept?
Through the chair to the councilman, I don't think we're talking to them right now about that part of it, sir, but we are talking to not only reentry, the Veterans Administration, to make sure that we have a way forward with services. We can add to that as we move forward. We spoke earlier about culinary. That's a terrific opportunity, and that is something that is attainable. Why? Because that's an area that's a lot of employment available. And we have some great places within Cuyahoga County, starting with Tri-C, that could provide that and give somebody a skill set so that they, again, could use it and not return.
But that doesn't happen unless you do it.
Yes, sir.
To talk about it is meaningless. To do it is an action.
Through the chair to the councilman, that is correct, sir, and that's why there are some of the staff members in the correctional facility who that will be their function to work with some partners to secure those, to secure whether it's a group of business owners or whether it's Tri-C or another venue that's going to give us those skill sets. What can you commit to us? What can you reasonably provide, given the fact that people aren't here for a long period of time, given the fact that you can't bring in a blowtorch into the jail, given those limitations, what service can you provide so someone leaves here with another skill set? Maybe they won't be doctors, but they leave here with something that they can use.
All right, thank you. Councilwoman Simon.
I'm going to defer this minute over to Councilwoman Vice Chair Stevens. She didn't have a chance to ask anything, and I'll go after her.
Thank you. Mr. President, to the sheriff. We have had a substantive conversation about the amount of money spent helping manage downtown activities for Cleveland. Why hasn't there been an approach to providing some services and support to East Cleveland, who's been devastated by corruption and crime in their police department?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, I've had conversation with the police chief and some of his commanders. They put in a formal request, and the downtown safety patrol has been going about once or twice a week for 3 to 4 hours to East Cleveland. It is not full-time service, but I can tell you that when they arrive, they are very well received by the East Cleveland police. So they assisted them, obviously, during their working hours, and it kind of takes the pressure off, at least while they're there. As far as a formal deployment plan to East Cleveland, that is something that's not just a simple reallocation of 3 deputies from here to there. That would be a significant deployment to do that right. And as I understand it, the sheriff's department has done that before. Once, I believe it was like 2 or 3 years, and once it was a matter of months. So it has been done, but we have to budget, and then it comes back to budget. We have to budget that so that we can do that properly. Because to do it there haphazardly is absolutely a disservice to the residents.
Okay, so, did you have conversations with them about how much of a budget was needed to at least do part-time regular security in East Cleveland?
Through the chair, to the councilwoman, we talked about numbers, not how many specifically. We discussed what their strength is and where they are and where we could supplement, and that's kind of where it ended. We didn't get to nuts and bolts. I didn't say if you pay this amount, we didn't quite get there. As I understand it, the executive was having some conversation with the mayor's office there, and that's changed, so I'm sure that there'll be something else there. But the chief and I had a pretty good understanding. They asked for a few things that we're helping them with. We cannot deploy full patrol services there on a full-time basis, but that's probably something to look at, ma'am.
Thank you.
Councilman Sweeney has chosen to forego his time, so at this time, Councilwoman Simon.
I just wanted to follow up about Councilman Gallagher's questions and statements. I just want, for the record, for you to know, I know that you are not responsible for the jail contract with the city of Cleveland. And I think that I understand that you've been supportive of trying to figure out a way to make that more equitable. Is that correct?
Through the chair, to the councilwoman, yes, I am not on a negotiating team for that. That's something that the executive is working out with the mayor's office. And I have made, obviously, his recommendations in line with what we provide every other municipality. So those numbers are kind of where they are, and it's for them to make that work.
And so I understand, and you understand, this jail is just a pre-holding facility. Hopefully, the people who stay there will only be there maybe 30, at most 60 days, and that there's contemplation of having a garden and things like that. Would you see any usefulness of having a foster area for kittens, or, other jails do this, that there's foster programs for animals? Do you think that would be something that would be a possibility?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, I think that would be a terrific idea, given the length of time, and we'd probably have to scale that. I think that the sentenced individuals would probably be the best candidates, because we know exactly how long they're going to be there. We can look at others and see, but that's a terrific idea, because that would certainly help the residents.
Okay, I'll work with you on that.
Thank you.
At this time, Councilwoman Meredith Turner.
Okay, just to piggyback right quick on the jail visit to Grafton, I believe it was, we saw the implementation of Councilwoman Simon. They had dogs. They were so sweet. We talked about seeing something like that in our own jail, so I would support that too. My question is, earlier this year that the county finally came to an agreement as it relates to the Clay settlement. Plaintiffs filed this lawsuit back in 2018, asserting claims that the conditions existing at that time in the county jail violated the constitutional rights of those previously detained in the jail. I was wondering if you could talk about some policies or procedures that you put in place to address the concerns of the Clay settlement, what changes have been implemented, and what changes have been implemented specifically as a result of this settlement.
Thank you. Through the chair of the councilwoman, thank you for the question. Good opportunity to share a little bit more about that. Before I get into that, I want to share two things. One, we had a jail inspection by the Bureau of Adult Detention 2 weeks ago, and they told us that that was the best inspection that we've had in 7 years. So that certainly speaks to the hard work of the men and women who are there. Chief Rivera, the associate wardens, all they're doing there to keep it going forward. So that's one. Two, Mr. Leach, who is the compliance coordinator, was in town last week. Had long discussions with him on a variety of things, and he identified, obviously, things that we can change, we can modify, and help us through this whole process. But having hired some of the positions, I can tell you that putting in place a system where we contract services, no matter what they are looked at closely, and the contract provider is obviously held to a standard that we agreed to. we're paying for a service, we expect to receive that service. That's only right. That's something that wasn't being done before. So therefore, those services translate to better conditions in the facility. So that's one thing that we're doing. Another one is, big part on that was the religious service part. Obviously, they specifically mentioned an imam, and that is another one that we're moving on and looking to hire to fill that position. I know that the cleaning staff is another component to it, and that's something we're looking to hire, haven't done yet, but despite that, good leadership in the jail has led to those lieutenants, sergeants, and corporals being more mindful of what needs to be taken care of, and it's a much cleaner place, I can tell you that. Absolutely much cleaner than when they had the inspection. I'm not saying we don't need a cleaning staff, okay? We don't need to cut that out. We need to follow up on that. But just merely telling the officers and the staff of the food provider, hey, this can't stay here. Hey, who's cleaning this up? Taking care of those things. Also, having the supervisors traverse through the jail on a regular basis, something that wasn't happening on a regular basis, says a lot for the pod officer and the residents in that pod, because they know someone's watching and, oh, we got to do it, and it gets done. So just by making some basic management strategies, make some changes, it made it much cleaner.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any further questions from council? If not, we will entertain a motion to recommend Patel to the full council for
So
second reading.
moved.
It's been properly moved by
Meredith Turner.
and
Second.
seconded by Councilwoman Sunny Simon. Madam Clerk, you can call the roll.
First, I would like the record to reflect that Councilmember Turner is Stevens is in attendance. Calling the roll, Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney. Okay, stepped away. Mr. Byrne,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher,
Sheriff, you got to get your numbers in order.
Mr. Schron,
Yes.
Ms. Conwell,
Yes.
Ms. Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Simon,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Council President Jones.
Yes.
The motion carries.
All right, thank you. We will see this on the council's regular meeting agenda this evening. At this time, we will have our discussion on our biennial operating budget, and I am going to pass.
Thank you, Council.
Oh, thank you, Sheriff. Okay. Now we'll pass the gavel down to Councilman. Okay. For the record, obviously, we have till about 4 o'clock because we still have 3 items on our executive session. So we want to use this time until then, about 4. And I've been told that I believe John and Sarah will be the presenters, Councilman Miller.
Thank you, Mr. President. My colleagues, welcome to the budget update for 2025. We are in the in-between year of our 2-year budget cycle when we have a shorter process to update the budget for the second year. Today, we will hear an overview from the administration, and the legislation will be introduced at tonight's meeting. And we will have hearings on key departments on the next 2 Mondays at 1 p.m. and hope to move the resolution out of committee on Tuesday, the 26th. If any director, whether of a department on our hearing list or otherwise, has concerns about the proposed 2025 budget, he or she should let council staff or me know as soon as possible. That includes concerns about the authorized strength number. Since once the authorized strength numbers are approved, new positions outside of authorized strength will require serious justification, which is expected to be done primarily through the budget process. So now I will call upon the administration for the overview presentation.
Good afternoon, Council President Jones and members of Council. I'm Sarah Nemistil, Director of the Department of Human Resources. So the County Executive's proposed budget update does include pay adjustments that HR is recommending to address pay equity. In late 2023, HR engaged a consultant to review non-bargaining employee pay on equity grounds based on how equity is currently defined in our employee handbook, as well as for supervisor employee compression. I am very happy to introduce my colleague, John Koenig, who is a key member of our HR compensation team, to provide a high-level overview to you of the study and our recommended adjustments.
Thank you. I'm John Koenig from Human Resources Compensation, and as Sarah said, I am here to provide some overview of the adjustments that we recommended. And I want to start by talking about how we even came to do this study. What we were noticing over the last year, throughout 2023, is that we were getting an unusually high number of requests from department leadership and even from employees themselves to review pay. And we recognize that this is a systemic problem with our compensation that wouldn't be best addressed with just a sequence of individual adjustments, employee after employee after employee, case by case. For one, we run the risk that way of creating a new problem for every one that we might solve. The many methods that we had for setting individual pay under the previous administrations and historically were then upended in the more recent time, in the last 4 or 5 years, by sudden changes in the hiring landscape. We've had to do different things to retain key employees and also to hire employees. And we've seen this up to now with a lot of our bargaining units as well, that we've had to make adjustments in the way that we pay. And the same goes for our non-bargaining staff. In particular, we've had to increase pay for certain current employees in order to retain them in key positions, and then also to be able to attract and finally hire employees who've recruited to fill vacancies. So I know you have, I think, in front of you some slides that we prepared. And so looking at slide 2, I want to point out that the way that it's supposed to work, the way that we should be able to pay employees as contemplated in the handbook, should not be so based on who are the peers that they have and whether or not those peer salaries are right, having to sort of tiptoe around them in our pay setting. We should be able to use the information that's sort of built into the pay schedule and to the pay grades in order to inform the way that employees are compensated. And that should be one fair standard that's applied for all positions across the county, not different in the department of this or the department of that from any other department that we have. And unfortunately, it just hasn't been the case, and we have not been able to operate on a unitary philosophy across the county. What the handbook contemplates is really what I have sort of titling the slide, which is that classifications assigned to the same pay schedule and pay grade really are thought to have comparable worth. The system that the PRC has of assigning classifications to a pay grade means that any classification assigned to that pay grade is substantially equal and really valued the same in terms of how we value that job as a county. So this section from Chapter 5 of the handbook contemplates the definitions of a promotion, a demotion, and a lateral transfer. And this isn't surprising that a promotion is defined as an increase in pay grade. If I'm moving from a job in a lower pay grade to a job in a higher pay grade, that this is a promotion. And with a promotion, the employee would expect normally to receive a pay increase. Likewise, if an employee is moving from a classification to another classification in the same pay grade, they probably shouldn't expect a change in pay. However, that hasn't been the way that we've been able to operate. There have been times where employees are promoted to a job, say to a supervisor position, several pay grades up from where they are, and we have not been able to offer them an increase in pay because of where all the peers are. So for an example, I have an employee near the middle of their range, let's say in pay grade 10, moving to a pay grade 13 position, and it so happens that all the other employees already in that pay grade 13 position are around the minimum of that range and making the same or less money than the employee currently is in their lower job. And when that happens, we have really two bad options. We can give the employee a pay increase and surpass all of those peers who are in the job and are probably going to have to help train this new employee on that new job, upsetting them, or we can offer the employee the promotion with little or no increase in pay and in order to keep them in place with the peers. but now we've upset this person and maybe risked them even accepting the promotion to begin with, more responsibility for no additional money. And so those are the sort of jackpots that we're in a lot because of the way that the pay currently is. There's never been a system to correct that. So moving forward to the next slide, slide number 3, the positions of comparable worth, these positions in the same pay grade, we want to apply these uniform principles to, so that we're able to actually operate on this basis of, I'm moving from a lower pay grade to a higher pay grade, I should get an increase. I'm moving within a pay grade, I shouldn't, those sorts of things. And this is already covered by the handbook in Chapter 9 about compensation, and I've put a box around the provision that this is sort of pursuant to, where we're making an equity adjustment here, but on a holistic basis to correct unacceptable internal salary inequity between these positions of comparable worth. So that's the overall program here. I want to give some examples, if you're turning to the next page, of kind of how pay looks right now without any adjustments in Cuyahoga County for our non-bargaining classified employees. So I'm looking at slide, I believe, 4. And on the left, what you see here is a diagram, a graph, and this is showing 2 county departments' pay. So in gray, we'll call that Department 1, and in purple, we'll call that Department 2. And what we see is across the board, for every position in every pay grade, along the bottom there, pay grades 5 through 17, which is sort of the meat of the schedule where the incumbents are, the position in Department 1 pays more than the position in Department 2. And so to give some examples of that, if you look at the blue box, example A, we have 2 senior supervisor positions. A senior supervisor is a supervisor of other supervisors. We have one in Department A and one in Department, one in Department 1 and one in Department 2. And the pay for these positions is considerably different. So these positions are supposed to be equivalent. They're in the same pay grade. They have a very similar function, and yet the pay is substantially different. And this is despite actually higher level of experience on average among the incumbents of the position in Department 2. You can see that there's, on average, for all the incumbents of that job, they have about 17 years of experience here on average compared to 7 in the Department 1 version of the job. And example B is similar, but this is even more stark of an example, that we have a position that's in use throughout many departments. The exact same job has quite a difference in pay, almost $10,000 different in annual salary, despite very similar average years of service between these 2 departments. So you can imagine operationally what happens under these circumstances is an individual who's already in this job in Department 1 wants to move as soon as possible to Department 2 whenever an opening happens. And so we create a lot of turmoil, a lot of work from the individual applying for a job, testing, interviewing, to move laterally within the same classification to another department that just has this legacy of paying more money. So what we're proposing to do is to correct that, to treat these positions very similarly based on the pay grade that they're in, and avoid that sort of just churning that we have, that going around and around the county looking for that kind of fairness, to create that fairness for yourself by applying for jobs. So if you turn to the next slide, you can see how that would be different with adjustments. You can see, first of all, on the left, the pay for the positions is much closer together. And in those 2 case examples that I gave, the pay is also much closer together. You can see that in the example A, we still have a little bit of a pay difference, because the pay for that senior supervisor position in the gray Department 1, it was just so high historically that we don't really quite reach that, but we will be very close. And in example B, we're exactly where we need to be, where that manager position is paid more commensurate with the average years of experience. So, because there's a little bit more experience of the managers in Department B, they on average are paid a little bit more. And it's important to note that we're dealing with averages here, but these are the effects sort of at a broad vantage point. If you turn to the following slide, what I want to show here is that these differences by department manifest very strongly in differences by gender and by ethnicity. So the way that this happens is not because necessarily entirely somebody was deciding on pay based on these demographic characteristics, but more that certain departments have a tendency to be more white and to be more male than others. And when those departments also happen to be those that pay more, we end up with this result. The result is that men are paid about 5 or 6% more than women on average, that people who are white are paid about 5 or 6% more than people of color on average across the county. And we propose, by using this method of adjusting, to correct. We have worked with a consultant to develop a formula that allows us to provide sort of a biased way of looking at each individual within their pay range, and then to adjust them to a certain place in their range based on, in part, their years of service with the county, their time in their job, and any compression that they have with subordinates. And as you can see, as a result, we really pretty much close these gaps. And you can see that on the last slide that I have in the packet. So the adjustments that we're
could you switch to slide 7 on this?
Oh, thank you. Yes. So this is the slide that shows sort of the effect of making the adjustments. And so, by applying the formula that is sort of neutral to these concepts, it's neutral to gender and neutral to ethnicity, we end up not only resolving these systematically when we're looking department by department, but also by these demographic characteristics. So I'm happy to take any questions. I know that was a high level and fast overview.
Councilman Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
John.
Right. I was phrasing my question. How many employees would this be?
We have roughly 1,200, round number, non-bargaining classified employees under the executive. The majority of them would receive some kind of an adjustment. However, it's worth noting, as we've seen, there are some outlying people who are very close to or at the top of their pay range already, and it's their pay actually that sort of drives these differences in averages among departments. So there are some employees who would not receive an equity adjustment because, as determined by sort of these formulas, their pay is already equitable.
Do you have a cost?
Yeah, so the cost split by departments is already in the budget book. And after all of the special revenues and reimbursements, when we just look at the hit to the general fund and the HHS levy fund, we're looking at just over $4 million in total for the adjustments.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Councilman Tron.
Just looking at the examples you have here, it looks like the fix is always to move the lower person up to the higher number.
Yes.
Is that Mike?
It is a little bit more than that. We have to remember, again, that we're dealing with averages here, so the average increases, even though that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody just moves up. But certainly nobody's pay is decreased as a result of the study. Not probably a very good HR approach, but also not legal to reduce the pay of civil service employees under the law.
Never asked for that. I just asked what you just did.
Yes.
There are other ways in which you can do that under other programs. What is market price? I understand you looked at what's internal, but what is the market price for these positions is really what I think should be looked upon. What did we do to compare what is a manager in a 16A, should they be paid?
Yep, very good question. The market for all of the positions on the classified schedules is represented by the midpoint for that position. And in these graphs, that's represented by very faintly a thicker blue-gray line that you can see. And so the majority of the incumbents right now in some of these departments are paid below that line, and in some departments are paid over. The goal is to get everybody up closer to that, and that is sort of an anchor point for this. Of course, people who have been at the county for 20 or 30 years are a little bit beyond that point due to their years of experience, as they would probably expect if they received an offer or were applying to come to us from outside of the county. So that's the anchor point, is what's already built into the schedules, is that midpoint level.
So what counties did we compare this to? Franklin, Hamilton?
Those were included.
So that's what drove the the rate to which you're saying should be our new rate? Or is that, I mean, is it the high one or is it the low one that on your chart here that you have?
Indirectly, yes, it was driven by some of these external peers that you mentioned, Franklin, Hamilton, as well as some of the local peers, the sewer district, the RTA. The midpoints for these pay ranges were established actually in 2022 when the PRC adjusted the salary schedule, and we've been working with and continue to work with that salary schedule for these adjustments.
Okay, so if we were to look at all of the high-end ones, you're going to find that that's the midpoint in all the rest of the 88 or 87 counties? Or
No.
whatever you pick for your market?
Yes, exactly. So for those that were identified as peers, so the PRC's effort and their consultant identified peers that are of a similar size to us in urban areas. So they're, of course, not comparing us to more rural counties in Ohio.
Sure.
But those, yes, exactly those that you mentioned, Franklin and Hamilton, were included.
So there's some master books that you can look to, or master charts you can look to that actually are driving the salary number you have in this piece of paper. Not because I'm sorry, but moving everybody from the bottom to the top is not
Is not a helpful practice on the balance.
It's not a good
right.
practice. I mean, it's not even, if that's not the correct number.
Correct.
If the high number is out of phase with what it should be, then
that's right.
Then they could actually be put in a stagnant position.
That's exactly
for
right.
a number of years is what other industries do if they've been overpaid.
That is exactly right. So I want to clarify, although it appears that just those at the bottom are moved up to the exact level of those at the top, it's not actually the case. What has happened over the last couple years is we have had to make a change in how we're setting pay for some positions, such as engineers in public works. We have had to actually set them at a certain level based on what the market is, but we had not moved other positions in those same pay grades. So some people were already at that market rate, and it wasn't necessarily an accident. So I don't want to leave the impression, and I think this was your question, that we simply moved everyone from a lower level in their pay range to the level of those who were higher. It's just that those who were higher in this example actually were set there on purpose based on some of the data that you're referring to.
I'm just looking at the sheets you have, and the sheet 4 then moves to sheet 5, and you moved it from what appears to be that's exactly what you did. Actually, in the 16A, you not only did that, but you then moved both categories up.
Well,
you moved it from 99 to 106.
Correct.
And you moved the 91 to 108.
Correct. So it's the combination of the two of at least these two data sources that, number one, we have what the market rate is for the job, and then number two, we have what are the person's years of experience in relation to that. A person who has more years of experience, who, as you can see in these cases, is halfway or more than halfway through a 30-year career, is going to expect to make slightly more than even that market rate. And certainly someone we were hiring from outside with those qualifications would as well.
You're saying years of service, even though the skill is not necessarily any different, you're going to pay them more because they've got more years of service, not because of whether they're contributing anything more in the job.
I think what we recognize is that there is a correlation overall, not on a necessarily individual basis, between years of experience and what people contribute to the job. I mean, I think it's intuitive that somebody, when they first started out in their career, has a lot to learn. People who have been at this organization for a few years have something. They're enculturated into the organization. They're more locked in. They're vested in the pension system. They're not going to leave us. And there's an inherent value in those things, aside from anything else we could talk about, that their years of service bring. What we see in our hiring trends is that managers prefer those who have more years of experience, and they also prefer to hire those who have been within the county. And so that tells us that there's some value associated with those two things.
Well, I'm just having a hard time following your numbers here, because the person with 17 years is being paid less in your one example, and the person with 14 years is being paid less, even though between 14 and 17, you're really splitting hairs as far as years of service, that, in my opinion. But the one that you have 7 years and 17 years, and the 17-year person is being paid less in your example.
Well, that's a perfect example that there are some people whose salaries were, as you said, so high that our goal is not just to match those. If those salaries are already slightly outlying and maybe higher than they should be, they are where they are, and everybody else is close as they should be.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one, and the question is, to what extent are the disparities that currently exist a result of basic structure, or are they the result of individual pay decisions that we made to bring people on at various points in the process?
I think it's a little bit of both. Certainly those that have happened, those pay decisions that have been made in the last 4 or 5 years, we can directly say are a result of changes in the market. We have allowed candidates to negotiate for jobs, for salaries when they're hired for jobs at the request of their department leadership, that they have to have this person, there's this critical need. We don't have engineers, we don't have bridge inspectors, we don't have IT security personnel, we don't have social work supervisors. You can say this across the board, that we've allowed ourselves into this situation a little bit at the expense of possibly having these positions vacant, and at the expense of the service that they provide. On the other hand, there is a long history of how these pay levels were set, and some of these positions haven't changed. There's people who have been in positions in the county for 20 plus years whose pay was set by previous administrations and previous forms of government, and they've never moved. As I think you know, and as we've talked about at other times, there's not a method yet for employees to move in the schedule to progress. So once pay is set at a low level, it tends to stay there, except for when some kind of a special adjustment is made. And HR is currently working and on selecting a vendor to help us sort of revamp those pay policies and to put something like that in place to avoid getting to this place again anytime soon.
Thank you very much, and it is now time to call Director Parfiowitz forward to give us the numbers. Thank you very much for the presentation from the HR folks.
Good afternoon, council members. Walter Parfiowitz from the Fiscal Office. Actually, the Budget Office, Office of Budget Management. At this point, I think all of you should have the book, which has full detail of the 2025 budget update, and also a packet of 4 documents. The 4 documents, what I'll be going over, they're more in summary form today, just to make this go a little bit quicker, and then allow for questions at the end. I know there's some questions about authorized strength and vacancy credits that I want to address, but I'll wait to do that towards the end, where I'll show you a clear example as to how it works and the impacts to the clerk of court's budget as the example. So most of the recommended adjustments are really technical in nature, except those necessary to implement authorized strength and vacancy credits. So let's start right with the budget update, the 1-page document that you have in front of you. It has 3 columns, one for the general fund, one for the levy fund, one for special revenue, and then a total or an all funds balance. So I'm going to start right with the general fund. That's where the majority of the entries are, as you can see. So we'll start with the revenue. The recommendation is to increase revenue by $26.1 million from the adopted budget. Sales tax will decrease by 18.8. I think most council members know that this year our sales taxes are really suffering compared to what we budgeted. We're up about 0.5% right now through October. So the proposal here is to actually take the projection at third quarter and increase it by 2.5%. So that actually reduces sales taxes that were originally budgeted in the adopted budget by $18.8 million. Recommendation is to increase property taxes by $6.7 million. This is all due to the appraisal. Recommendation increase fines and forfeitures by $3.2 million. These are excess private foreclosure sale revenue that's currently on deposit with the clerk of courts that can be transferred to the general fund. The recommendation is to increase charges for services by $1 million. This is the $5 increase in recording fees that was recently approved by Senate Bill 94. Recommendation is to increase in our governmental by roughly $100,000. This is really a combination. State public defenders reimbursement rate dropped from 85 to 78%, but at the same time, we're increasing our budget for assigned counsel in the municipal court, so we'll get a little bit more reimbursement. And we're also going to budget casino tax at full value, at least what's been coming in recent years. The recommendation is to increase interest earnings by $19.3 million. What I have is a projection from Meter, investment interest of 27.4, and the Treasurer's Office projected star interest of roughly $8 million for next year. So the total being 19.3. The recommendation is to increase other revenue by $13 million. This is the $5 million on the Lumen loan that we should have collected this year, but we're going to push it into next year. It was originally a $10 million loan. We collected $5 this year. We'll collect $5 next year. $3 million repayment from the 911 Consolidated Shared Service Fund, and a $5 million repayment from the Health and Human Services Levy Fund. Finally, a recommendation to increase other taxes by $1.6 million. These are bed taxes, so all it's doing is truing it up to our 2024 run rate. Next, we'll go on to the expenditures. The recommendation is to increase expenditures by $22.1 million. So this includes personnel services of 18.2, other expenditures of 3.9. So let me go over the personnel services. That's the vast majority, some of what John talked about as well with the equity study, and then I'll make some comments about vacancy credits and authorized strength at the same time. So $2.5 million, just going right down the list, $2.5 million increase for current payroll. So that's taking pay 19, first payroll in September. $1.6 million increase for what John referred to, the equity adjustments for the non-bargaining staff. $7.9 million increase for positions that are in the process of being hired. $1.8 million increase for vacancies that have been agreed to by various departments in the administration. $3.4 million increase for workers' compensation. These are charges that are necessary, and you'll see them speckled into the general fund, the Health and Human Services Fund, and also in the special revenue funds, because we need to start paying for workers' comp. We've been living the last several years off of the dividends that we received back from workers' comp for the last several years, primarily due to COVID. Then you will see a $3.9 million offset, or a decrease for vacancy credits, and we'll get into that in a little bit. And about $800,000 for sheriff's deputy equity and cost of living adjustments that are beyond the 2% that are built into the budget. And then we're actually budgeting $4 million more in overtime for the sheriff's office. Other expenditures increases, while they're smaller, they're still quite a bit. There's around $53,000 Court of Appeals for an IT contract for Info Computer Solutions. This is really a technical adjustment. We just missed it in the budget process. We're increasing the municipal courts budgets by $1.7 million for assigned counsel. That will, in fact, come back to us in the form of a 78% reimbursement from the state public defender. $900,000 decrease to the CFDC rents, a decrease to the fiscal office budget for lease payments or rent payments that we're making for the convention center. Around $79,000 increase to veteran services due to the change of the inside millage. $2.3 million increase to the Board of Elections for the 1801 lease. That's the Cleveland Plain Dealer building. $20,000 increase to internal audits budget for software and training. And then also $602,998 increase to the sheriff's office to replace JO2 archive video server equipment that's failing. We also have subsidy increases of $3.1 million. These are, again, technical nature for corrections due to accounting adjustments, TIFs, remaining balances, and trustee accounts for various bond issues, except for the dog kennel, of course. $61,682 increase for brownfield debt, $17,932 increase for Shaker Square debt, $996,700 increase for the convention center, and this is the offset for the item I mentioned up above for the CCC-FDC. These two net each other out basically in the budget. $500,000 increase for the 2017 sales tax bonds, $7,500 decreased for Progressive Field. We budgeted it slightly higher than the $2,550,000 that were required. We had $2,557,500. Finally, we have a $1,493,248 increase for the dog kennel due to expected revenue not covering the kennel's expenses. We do have a meeting scheduled this week, the Administration and Public Works, to talk through this issue. I believe it's on Friday this week. So these adjustments in total reduce the 2025 recommended budget deficit to $10.5 million, which is roughly $1 million less than what was adopted last year. So that more or less takes care of the general fund column. So now I'm going to move into the levy column unless we have questions about the general fund.
Let's complete the slide, and then we'll see what questions we have.
Okay, thank you. For the Health and Human Services levy, the recommendation is to increase revenue by $3.9 million. It's primarily property taxes, and it's all based on what was collected this year. So that's our 2024 run rate. The recommendation here is to increase expenditures by $5 million and subsidies by $4.2 million. The increase in expenditures is this partial repayment to the general fund from the levy. For those that may not know, in 2019, $15 million was transferred from the general fund to the levy fund. This is paying back one third of it. The $4.2 million increase in subsidies is the levy's portion of the personnel service adjustments to the Department of Health and Human Services. And they include the items in the second column under expenses. We have about a $900,000 increase to current payroll, $2.5 million increase for equity adjustments, $2.6 million increase for positions in the hiring process, $1.4 million increase for vacancies that have been identified by both administration and the department, $1 million increase for workers' compensation necessary for next year's payments, and a $3 million decrease for vacancy credits. Again, we'll go over that in a minute. And just as we had on the general fund side, there's a $600,000 increase for Department of Senior Adult Services for their portion of the 1801 lease, which is again the plain dealer. So these adjustments in total revenue and expense increase the recommended budget deficit to $6.7 million. Which is $5.3 million more than what was approved in the adopted budget.
So, thank you, and I think we'll break now and see if we have any questions on the general fund or the levy fund. So, I just have a comment that I do not support the $5 million transfer from HHS to the general fund. The levy ballot language describes the HHS levy as supplementing the general fund for HHS purposes. It was never intended to be the only source. There are so many HHS needs out there. My preference would be to wait at least until we get the 2024 actuals in February and see if this transfer is really needed. But whether we do this or not, it's up to the council to decide. So I put that out there for my colleagues to think about. Thank you. Anything else? So, Mr. President, we're at 4 o'clock. Can we go a little longer, or do you really need to move on to the?
I'll give you 5 more minutes.
Okay.
Take 5
So,
minutes.
you can give us a quick summary on the rest of the slide, we can get that far.
Okay, special revenue, those are very simple. $7 million coming into for workers' compensation from the general fund, the levy fund, and the special revenue fund. So that's money that will be used next year to pay the workers' comp expenses. The federal revenue in the special revenue column, that's the state and federal reimbursements from the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services for the personnel costs that are in the column labeled HHS levy. The $16 million reduction there, that's removing workforce development's revenue from the county's books because they're no longer part of the county. They've moved to
Nonprofit status.
not-for-profit status, exactly. And then the $3.2 million that you see there, that's a Rock Hall pledge. That's what's going to be used to pay off their debt service each year. So we're required by the indenture to carry the $3.2 million in debt service on our books, so I find it appropriate to show that the pledged dollars are going to be used to cover that. Actually, not even impact the county. The debt will be paid directly by the Rock Hall. The expenses, same format as before. $5 million decrease to current payroll based on pay 19, $3.6 million increase for equity, 5.4 for positions in process, 6.2 for vacancies, 2.6 for their workers' compensation expenses, and then an offset of 11.4 for vacancy credits. Again, removing the expenses for the workforce development's budget from our county budget, and then also the $3.2 million in debt service. The net effect of all this reduces the adopted deficit by $12.9 million. Let's flip over to the second page if we could. Just quickly go over that. I wanted everyone to have a glimpse of all of those payroll adjustments that you saw on the previous page in a departmental form. So this page shows all of those personnel services expenses by department and even by division. So I broke HHS out to the division level, also broke out Public Works to the division level. So you have in column one the adopted budget, the way that it was passed with the FTEs, and the next column over, you see pay 19, that's the first pay in September. This was our starting point for authorized strength and vacancy credits. Everyone received pay 19, those were the FTEs associated with it. The next column is the equity that John spoke about, the total expense. The next column are the personnel hiring requests that are in process right now. There's 186 of those. There's vacancies of 122, totaling 9.4 million. Workers' compensation, you see that that's speckled all the way through executive, elected officials, and boards and commissions. That totals the same $7 million. And then we have $18.2 million in vacancy credits, calculating a new budget for the county executive departments, and an authorized strength of their FTE level for the next year. I know.
Okay, we are gonna stop there.
Okay.
We will pick this up on Monday, and I would encourage my colleagues to look at this 4-page summary that we received, which has a lot of good information. I'm sure we're going to have a discussion about authorized strength and vacancy credits. So,
Councilman Miller, let me just say that the third page details the authorized strength. That's the FTEs and what's built into the budget. But the fourth page, I think, is more crucial because it defines authorized strength vacancy credit and shows how it works with the county budget process.
okay. Thank you very much for getting us started, and I am now going to turn the gavel back to the council president, and he's going to give us the introduction for the executive session. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Miller. All right, at this time, all meetings of the Cuyahoga County Council are open to the public under the Ohio Open Meetings laws. Under that law, council may go into executive session during a meeting for specifically authorized purposes. During executive session, council confers outside of the hearing of the public. Council may not make any decisions about any matters in executive session. All decisions are made in public. This afternoon, the council will go into executive session for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining matters. During this time, our live stream will be down, and we ask all those not specifically needed for the executive session to remain in council chambers. Council members will convene in the adjacent Committee Room A and will re-enter the meeting once the executive session has ended. Is there a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining matters?
So moved.
Second.
Probably moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, call the roll, please.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Mr. Byrne,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher, Mr. Schron,
Yes.
Ms. Conwell,
Yes.
Ms. Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is away from her desk. Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Council President Jones.
Yes.
The motion carries.
All right. We are reconvene. We will proceed into executive session now. And we are now back on the record. Is there any miscellaneous business? Not, if nothing else holds our attention, our meeting is adjourned, and we will reconvene at 5 p.m. for our regular council meeting.